Hey everybody, quick programming update. Unfortunately, recently Andrew caught COVID, and that has kind of put a pause on some of our recording sessions of more recent media, specifically Prey and Bullet Train. We're still going to do those. Those will be coming up soon, so get excited for that. In the meantime, this week, enjoy an older episode that we recorded a while back. This was a test episode to see if I even knew how to podcast. This one's a fun one. This is on the Rocketeer. So you'll notice the format is a little bit different and the scoring system is a little bit different, but other than that, it's the same great spoilers intended you know and love. Okay, question. What is your favorite thing about Timothy Dalton, and why is it his cleft chin? His beautiful sculpted cleft chin.
It's interesting too because he has like the narrow face with the cleft chin, and usually when you see like the action hero, it's the big jawline,
like
right?
the really big, strong jaw. It's like a Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah, like a lantern jaw, I think is the term.
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, Timothy Dalton is a fantastic action guy.
He does his own stunts.
He does his own stunts.
Mostly,
asterisk.
If insurance allows.
Yeah, most of the time. They didn't allow it in License to Kill, the one that he was James Bond in for the second time. And the last time.
James Bond.
He was James Bond. He's still James Bond in my heart. He's my favorite Bond besides Daniel Craig.
Oh, wow. That's
big.
I don't know how I feel about that one.
Big shot you're taking there. Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, like he played the most real Bond to the novels, I felt.
He was growing up my least favorite Bond, and then as an adult has grown on me a lot. Just because as a kid, I loved the Roger Moore, Sean Connery cartoon shenanigans.
Camp.
The camp, because I was a kid, you know?
Yeah. I mean, going from Roger Moore to Timothy Dalton is a very big.
It's a huge
jump.
That's an abrupt change.
Yeah. But the thing that I love about Dalton is, one, he does his own stunts, but he's also just a fantastic actor.
He's very good.
And in The Rocketeer, which is what we're talking about this week, he loves to, they kind of like not poke fun. They give a little bit of a nod to, one, him doing his own stunts and him being a good actor, a successful one in the film where he's also playing an actor that does his own stunts.
Who is also good and successful.
Yes.
Well, and he also in this film, he's playing a like 1930s, film star. And I think the casting was great for that because he has this like,
the dashing debonair.
It's the Errol Flynn kind of feel.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Am I using the right name?
I think so.
I
will allow it.
It's good enough.
Never seen an Errol Flynn movie, actually, so I don't.
You threw a name at me, and I'm like, yeah, that sounds right.
Wasn't he like the original Robin Hood, right?
Oh, that sounds right.
You're asking questions I have no answer to.
I went to too deep a cut here, apparently.
Yep.
Now I have to research. I have to be right or wrong and find out soon.
We are Spoilers Intended, and this is the show. I am one of your hosts, Andrew Knuckles, co-hosted by Stephen Ford.
Hello there.
And Ryan Denley.
Fun fact, I actually had the same haircut as the Rocketeer when I was a kid. It was terrible.
So you must have loved this film, right?
It was pre the film, so yeah.
And
after seeing it, I changed my haircut.
And we are a podcast about series and films. And here we are.
Speaking of films, Errol Flynn was in fact Robin Hood.
Oh, okay. Well, congratulations.
Got it.
You got it right.
1938. Nailed it.
Nice.
That is super relevant to this movie, which is also set in 1938.
Yep. And we are talking The Rocketeer, 1991 Disney film, and it is emphatically a period film. So before we kind of get to the actual review section of the podcast, we're going to talk a little bit about some of our favorite, maybe not our favorite, emphatically favorite.
Yeah, favorite's a dangerous word.
Yeah, films that we love that are period films that we would watch again, more than likely.
Well, I hope so, because we're going to promote it. And I think I'm going to go first here.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're gonna knock out some chronological order if we can. So I'm kicking this off with Last of the Mohicans.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a 1992 release.
Close,
not quite, but close. Daniel Day-Lewis, who many people know, method actor extraordinaire.
He has won a lot of Academy Awards.
A lot of awards.
An obscene amount, I would say.
But French and Indian War. So this is the war, if you care anything about history, this is the war that the British fought against the French and Indians to protect the colonists, the ungrateful colonists who a decade later, said we don't want to pay taxes for this war and threw some tea in the harbor. Yeah, that's not actually what goes on here. This is really just detailing kind of the involvement, some scuffles that take place and some of the interactions with some of the tribes and these things. But it is a very, very kind of narrow piece, just a couple of people involved, one of whom is, in fact, the last of the Mohicans. And music's phenomenal. Great action set pieces, some really good tight battles, chase scenes, these kinds of things. And it's emphatically set in a period, which is actually kind of interesting because it's not one that we look at very often. Like you go to school, nobody really talks about the French and Indian War, right?
It's probably maybe 2 days worth of history learning. It's like a chapter. All right, we're going to the Revolutionary War.
No. We take the Ron Swanson approach, and history began in 1776, and everything before it was a mistake, right? And that's the American public education, right? So
there's some little darts being thrown.
Just throwing it down there. I'm not going to tell you it's the most historically accurate, but it is very interesting. It is very cool to see that era because unless you're going back to like The Patriot or something, which is a little more recently released film, it's not often that you really find a lot of big American films set in an era pre-revolution.
Yeah, that is quite true.
Yeah. So it can be fun to take that trip. But yeah, I don't know if either, I assume both of y'all have seen it.
So I've seen it, but it was probably in the late 90s is the last time. I have not seen it in recent years. So how does it hold up? Have you watched it?
I've seen it in the last decade or so pretty well. I mean, I saw it in theaters.
Yeah.
92, I was like 9.
Like I remember, I don't think I saw it in theaters, but I remember it being a big deal and I remember renting it and I remember it was very long and I remember I enjoyed it.
It is a very long film.
That's about all of the...
Especially for the time.
Yeah. And it has some, for being kind of, a war movie, it has some big slow pieces in between, right?
I mean, every film around this time has to have a love story in it. You can't have one of these large spanning films without it.
This one had like 3.
It does.
Yeah.
It's been probably about a decade since I've seen it.
Yeah.
And I remember when I watched it when I was really young, I was like, wow, this is very violent and probably a little too old for what I was watching it at. But watching it the second time, especially being more in tune with soundtracks, which is like kind of what I go to a lot of movies for, the soundtrack for this film is just phenomenal.
It is a little dangerous sometimes to listen to just the soundtrack straight because a lot of the songs all start to sound the same because they were building off the same theme.
And then you get to Canoe Massacre.
Yeah, okay, yes. Goes a little off the rails. But yeah, so if you haven't watched it lately, it's definitely worth a look. Good classic out of Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yeah.
So let's see, who is next?
I'll jump up next. Mine is definitely way more recent than that. It is Jojo Rabbit. Now, this is from Taika Waititi. And it is essentially a movie set, during World War II. And I don't want to say too much about it to spoil it because there are a lot of twists and turns along the way. But essentially it is like if you just watch the trailer or if you just go in, with a little bit of information, it looks like it's going to be a comedy about a kid whose imaginary best friend is Hitler. And I know at the outset that sounds very weird. And it starts off and it's really good in that like all the acting's really good. The cinematography is great. The editing is really fun. The premise itself is really fun. But then again, it kind of evolves and morphs over the course of the film. Yeah. And you end up feeling lots of emotions.
Yeah. Well, and those are like the best comedies, I think.
Yeah. Especially like, if you liked Guardians of the Galaxy, Flight of the Conchords, you're a Taika Waititi fan, What We Do in the Shadows, the style of humor that like it's going to be. But then it sneaks in a really good message. And again, a lot of emotions that like just come out of nowhere. You're like, I'm having fun. And like, wait, I'm feeling things. What's happening?
I'm crying. Why am I crying?
Yeah.
So when did this come out?
I thought I had it up and I didn't.
Oh, caught him unprepared. But this was a pretty recent release, maybe 2016. It's going to be my guess.
I want to say it's like 2018.
That's also very fun.
2019.
2019.
Very
weird.
Yeah. Came out in 2019.
It happened like last week, right? Pandemic didn't actually.
Well, that's the problem with the pandemic is like sometimes you think of things that happened
6 years ago.
Pre-pando, as I've heard the Gen Z
please
say.
Don't say that ever again.
We're not doing pre-pando?
No.
And it's like, that feels like it was 6 years ago. And then other times I'm like, that was like last week. What do you mean? It's like time doesn't mean anything.
Andrew tried to sneak one in there, but I'm not going to allow it.
Dude, that's so mid, man.
I just want you to know that I'm watching you. I'm always watching.
I am the youngest. I'm the closest to Gen Z that we can get in this podcast.
And you're still like a decade shy.
For those at home, Andrew is dabbing and he's on TikTok right now. I can't. Okay.
That wasn't even. That was so bad. Don't do that ever again.
Well, I don't want to hit the mic while I'm trying to move.
Don't ever do that.
Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and jump in here. I am doing Catch Me If You Can, 2002 Steven Spielberg with Tom Hanks and Leonardo DiCaprio. Probably one of my favorite period films of all time.
Yeah, you just listed 3 big names in cinema, just period.
Yeah, I'm actually not the biggest Spielberg fan. But this is definitely one of those films where he kind of takes a back seat and lets the actors really do a lot more of the work than a lot of his special effects kind of background and everything. Where he's him for War of the Worlds or Jurassic Park or AI, all these other like really big CGI kind of experiences, right? Or graphic experiences.
Did he do Saving Private Ryan?
Yeah, he did.
Okay, I was gonna say I feel like that was one people would know over like.
Jaws is where I go immediately every time.
War of the Worlds is one of his highest grossing films. But anyways, we're just going to move on from this. So Catch Me If You Can. It is placed in the 1960s of the Gilded Age of flying for Pan Am Airways, which is unfortunately a defunct airline now, but they have fantastic graphic design. And the whole premise is Frank Abagnale Jr., is 16 years old, and he is a little bit of a con artist, and he decides that he wants to start basically counterfeiting checks. And this is actually part of a real true story, and it's kind of the back and forth cat and mouse chase between Tom Hanks's character, which is an FBI agent, and Leonardo DiCaprio's character, and him just trying to basically con his way into different job titles. So sometimes he's a pilot, sometimes he is a lawyer, sometimes he's a doctor. And it's just basically Tom Hanks essentially trying to catch him while globetrotting around the world. And it's honestly a really heartfelt film at its core of friendship and loss and trying to, kind of make do with not a really good hand to start out with for, the birth lottery, essentially. And Christopher Walken's in it. He's another fantastic actor. And I can't. Amy Adams is in it too.
I remember like that being one of the first movies where I saw Leonardo DiCaprio and thought, this guy's a really good actor.
Same, actually.
Like I remember when I saw Titanic in theaters, I thought, yeah, he's fine.
Yeah,
like
it's fine.
It's fine. And I this was The Beach came out before or after that?
Before.
I think it was right before.
Yeah,
or sometime before. Yeah, but like. I don't remember watching The Beach like when it came out, but I remember Catch Me If You Can was like the first movie where I was like, oh, now hold on.
Oh, he can act.
Yeah, this Leo DiCaprio kid's
it's pretty good. Yeah. And then, kind of fast forward a little bit in his career, he then gets to do The Aviator, where he is Howard Hughes, who is also in The Rocketeer. Leonardo DiCaprio is not in The Rocketeer, but Howard Hughes is.
Yeah, fun twist on Catch Me If You Can. I think I remember seeing an article not that long ago where Frank Abagnale Jr. actually admitted that most of the stories in his book that it's based on were actually made up.
Oh, really?
That it was like a con
of a con.
It's the long con.
A meta con. I'm not 100% certain how much what I'm saying is true because I kind of looked at it and I was like, I don't want to read that because I like being fooled.
Yeah, like that's definitely one of those stories where you're like, I don't really want to know that this isn't real.
Yeah, I want to know that he actually spent like 8 years in a hotel just writing off cheap checks or something.
Yeah.
I want the jet setting Pan Am. I also love Andrew's priorities. It's a defunct airline, but they had great graphic design. No, it's okay, guys. You don't have the plane doesn't have to get me there. It just looks good doing it.
I mean, their graphic design is amazing.
So, on that note, it may be time to move into another movie that has great graphic design, and that is the focus of the show, The Rocketeer.
Mm-hmm.
So, as we already said, this is Disney, 1991.
It is.
I am accurate so far.
And it takes place in 1938.
Yes, set in 1938 Los Angeles.
Yep.
Or just outside.
It actually took me a minute to figure out that it was in Los Angeles.
With the whole movie star thing to tip you off?
Well, no, I mean, like, I figured that out by the time it got to that point. But up until then, there was no indicator that it was
farmland.
Actually, I thought it was like Iowa or something.
I mean, that's fair. There was still a lot of farmland in California, but at the time, LA had not encroached that far out. So
when you need a lot of space to fly around on a jetpack.
You do. You also need a lot of space to just fly planes in general, which is, kind of a big part of this movie.
It is.
It was also directed by Joe Johnston, who in the 90s also did Jumanji and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
I didn't know he did Jumanji.
Yeah.
Well, and he did the first Captain America film, didn't he?
Yeah, he got that because of basically the Rocketeer.
Oh, okay.
His success quote unquote, his selling of this as a period piece is kind of what made that come through. Because you can feel it when that's going on, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So who wants to give a synopsis?
I'll give a synopsis. Okay. I'm as fresh as I possibly can be. I watched it this morning. And so we basically follow a young upstart pilot who is unfortunately very poor. And
common story.
Yeah. So by happenstance, he kind of comes into acquisition of a experimental jetpack that is developed by Howard Hughes. If you're not familiar, he is the designer for the Spruce Goose or the Hercules aircraft, which is at the time the largest aircraft.
Up until 2019, it was still the largest aircraft we've ever flown.
Yeah, massive aircraft. It only basically flew like 1,000 feet or something like that, like barely over water. Anyways, but so he acquires this jetpack, and he kind of is being targeted by the mob, by also an unknown party, while he is essentially trying to figure out a way to make money off of his use of this jetpack.
As all good red-blooded Americans do.
Yeah, it's like, oh, look at this weird piece of technology. I'm going to try and fly it, and
I could sell tickets.
Yep. And yeah, his girlfriend is also an upstart or a up-and-coming movie star.
Yeah, she's trying to get established in the world of Hollywood.
Yep. Yeah. And you get to follow her and Timothy Dalton, who is the big, like, Clark Gable kind of character.
He's not Clark. They reference Clark. He says hi to Clark Gable in the movie.
Yeah.
But he is Neville Sinclair.
Neville Sinclair. And just kind of him trying to, you don't really know exactly what he's about, but he seems a little sketchy at first.
A little sleazy.
Yeah, a little sleazy.
Nefarious, I think is the
typical
word.
Hollywood kind of.
It's a very meta film.
Yep.
Yeah.
And of course it is 1938, so that means the Nazis are kind of in the forefront for the general overarching bad guys of the world. Go figure, right? And
it's very convenient that they're there to be that.
Yeah.
Almost like history happened.
Almost. So yeah, and that's kind of the general gist of the film. I don't want to give too much away. So we have our review scores, and we have two scores that we normally base our reviews off of. We have our technical score, which is the spectacle, the performance, the score, and the plot. So we have kind of like the CGI, the graphics. Well, not CGI. Here, the graphics, the cinematography. Then we have the performance of the actors. How well did they sell it? Did they elevate the role? Did they kind of bring it down? Stale performance. Then we have the score, which is obviously the music. And then we have the plot, which is the story, the meat of the film. And then we have the entertainment score, which is completely separate from the technical score. And this is just kind of, did we like it?
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be a little higher. Sometimes it can be a little lower than the technical score. So our review score, technical, is a 7.3. So that's a pretty fair showing, I think.
That's pretty solid, actually.
Yeah. Then we have our entertainment score, which gave it a whole point extra, 8.3. So we clearly enjoyed the film,
even if it's a good jump.
Maybe not the most technically sound piece of film ever to be made.
Yeah, the 30-year gap here is probably going to hurt it some, I imagine. So Andrew just had a lot to say. I'm going to take over for a minute.
I'm tired.
I'm going to let him have a sip of water. So maybe some things we liked about it, we didn't like about it. I already mentioned a little bit that the 30-year gap and the effects suffer maybe a little. And by a little, I mean a decent bit. They're aware of it. They did some green screening.
I was going to say, I would not push back necessarily, but I would say that you're sitting at the end of the blue screen era, pre CG era. And I would say for that era, it executed things as good as you could do on a blue screen in 1991.
Right. And I think they were very conscious of that, right? Because we don't necessarily get a ton of Rocket Man with jetpack flying around. They did enough of it to tell the story of, well, he's got a rocket pack and he flies around, but that was not just this is all he is, right?
But there are several shots where it looks like they definitely knew the limitations of what they were working with, and they shot it a specific way to make it look as good as possible. Instead of like, I know, stuff from like the mid 80s and some of the late 80s where like they shouldn't have shot it like that. You can tell it's terrible.
They believed the technology was real.
Yeah.
Yeah. And because I actually thought this was my first time actually ever seeing the film,
which is just
today.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm the youngest here. I kind of, it just skipped that little section of time.
He just dabbed again for everyone at home.
I did not.
He dabbed.
Gen Z, yo.
Stop it.
Okay, but no, I actually thought the graphics were pretty good.
Okay.
The thing that kind of killed me a little bit, or maybe cringe, was just and I understand that this is the 1930s in Hollywood. They're trying to explain to you that there is a lot of sexism in Hollywood, but then they kind of do the same thing by also being incredibly sexist, specifically to Jennifer Connelly, a couple times throughout the film. And that part definitely doesn't hold up now.
Well, it's interesting just to kind of see them be like, Hollywood's full of sleazeballs, while we're currently going through the whole, we've been through some of the Me Too stuff. And we've already had, Hollywood's full of sleazeballs. And it's like, well, they're saying it was sleazeballs in the 30s, sleazeballs in the 90s, and we know it's sleazeballs in the 20s. So what has actually changed?
Nothing.
Probably nothing.
Yeah.
I remember like my biggest thing was I remember as a kid when I first saw this movie, we rented it. I didn't see it in theaters. I remember being let down. Like I remember like wanting more action, more Rocket. Like I felt like
it was a pretty slow moving film.
Well, as a kid especially, like I was like, this is putting me to sleep. Like, let's go. You've got the rocket pack. Put it on. Like I remember being very
you
like
just fly everywhere.
Yeah, like I remember again not knowing anything about budget constraints and the special effects budget and things of that nature. I was just like, why is he not flying everywhere? Like I would never take it off.
Solve all your problems.
Yeah.
Just fly over there.
And so I remember enjoying certain scenes, but I remember feeling like the stuff in between was just way too long to get where it was going. As to where now, like this is the second time I've probably seen it as an adult. I watched it about 5 years ago with my wife. She had never seen it. And so, we watched it, and I like it a whole lot more as an adult, I think, than I did as a kid, which is ironic because this is definitely
geared towards kids.
Children.
And maybe that's why it wasn't that successful.
That's my gut check on it, just because I remember being a kid and being like, eh.
Yeah.
But again, the lead up to it, the marketing, the graphic design and like the posters and like
it's fantastic.
The McDonald's toys and the commercials and being like all about the Rocketeer, and then like seeing it being like, oh, okay, well, yeah.
Well, the Art Deco design of his actual outfit with the really slick leather jacket with like the double-breasted buttons, and then you have like obviously the leather straps for the backpack, and then his helmet is just so cool because it has like the fin down the center, and the really kind of like alien-looking eyes or space-looking eyes.
So it's pretty funny to me because you're like, Andrew's over here. As a kid, I didn't see it. Ryan, as a kid, I didn't like it, and I'm over here like, well, I saw it in theaters as a kid.
And I loved it.
Pretty sure we rented it when it came out on VHS. I also can remember renting the Rocketeer NES game and playing it.
Woof.
And of course,
had an NES game
for
it?
And it's one of those things where it's released immediately with the film.
Oh, no.
So it's really rushed. And, I was 8 or 9 or whatever. Game was really hard because you had to like manage the fuel to be able to fly. You only had so many bullets and stuff. So that sticks with me. I remember playing that game and just be like, this is so hard, but it's so cool because I can fly. And then you run out of fuel because you're a kid. You can't manage anything.
Yeah. The one thing that I noticed too, just maybe because like I really do pay attention to a lot of soundtracks and everything. Listening to this is James Horner. You may know him from Titanic, and this movie came out right before Titanic did, and this soundtrack, like the whole time, I'm like, this sounds like something I've heard before. And then I was like doing something else. I'm like, Titanic, that's what it is. And then I looked it up and I'm like, oh, it's just him. And he basically just made the same soundtrack with a little bit of different.
So you're saying
Definite.
James Cameron was like, I need you to do this movie called Titanic. And he's like, hold on, let me copy my homework. And
It's possible they used temp music for it.
Yeah, they used
they may
Rocketeer
have.
temp music, and then James Cameron's just like, "Oh, I love this," and he's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, let me make a few changes."
I mean, because there are definitely some note progressions in that that are honestly like, I'm like, this is just Titanic.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The soundtrack's fantastic.
Yeah. He also has credits for Avatar, which I'm not going to say much about that soundtrack because that is a whole different journey.
Yeah.
Magnificent Seven.
Yeah.
And Mask of Zorro.
I mean, Mask of Zorro is a great film.
And Amazing Spider-Man.
Ooh.
Which may also be recent on your mind because he technically has credits in No Way Home.
Does he?
Yeah, because
Don't
they
say that.
They use some of the elements.
They use
from
the
it.
elements of it from Amazing Spider-Man.
Okay. That's fine. I will forgive that.
He's not. Sadly he passed away in 2016.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why I was like, how? Like,
yeah, because they're using 2012 stuff.
Yeah. Hey man, check out this spoiler wall. It's got high quality Patreon content, bifolding Discord flaps, and the staying power of additional episodes.
Well, features like that don't just fall out of the sky. Where would you find something like that?
Looks like this is all part of SpoilersIntendedPodcast.com.
Well, let's go give it a whirl.
Alrighty, everyone, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed a quick intermission. In case you didn't get the message, it is all spoilers all the time from here on out. And on that note, let's talk some Spectacle, and I'm going to let Ryan go first.
I'll lead off. Okay. Spectacle, I gave it a 9.
Okay.
Wow.
There's exploding Zeppelins. There is a man that gets caught on fire after Gum moves and releases rocket fuel onto his body as he explodes, screaming to the ground. And that man is Timothy Dalton, and he blows up the word land in the Hollywood land sign. A dude gets in the back of a truck and makes it go rocket fast. What else? At one point, the mob turns on Timothy Dalton because they find out he's a Nazi and then help the FBI shoot at him. And an FBI agent and a mobster look at each other while they're shooting machine guns at Nazis and go, and keep shooting.
That's actually one of my favorite movie tropes.
Yes.
Is the mobster. Not with the heart of gold, because they're still scummy, but really the mobster that's like, you know what? You're the worst evil at this point.
Yeah.
Right.
They've crossed the line that even the mobster would never dare.
In the trivia, it says that like it was very common in the 30s that the FBI actually did use the mob to help sniff out like Nazi spies and stuff. Because
saboteurs.
Yeah, because the Nazis in Italy, you know, Mussolini was like really like bad towards like the Sicilian family. And so like it's a very like, yeah, like they were like, we'll help you find. And it's like this weird, strange bedfellows era that like, anyways, that was very comedically represented in this movie. Spectacle, I gave it a 9 just because like I found myself just being like, wow, this is crazy. Like a Zeppelin just made it into Los Angeles. Like nobody spotted this thing, and then
it's. Go ahead.
I don't know. I mean, like they did, like in the newsreel at the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
I mean, they did say like, hey, there's a German Zeppelin doing they did,
didn't they?
You know, a glory tour over the United States, and it just happens to also have a bunch of paratroopers on it.
It's a diplomatic tour.
Yeah. That is completely coinciding on, our lovely Neville Sinclair.
It has nothing to do with the fact that Hitler would also like to get this rocket pack out of L.A. and back to the motherland.
Nothing at all.
Nothing.
Yeah.
No. Don't look behind that curtain. There's more Nazis there too. Well, I guess I'll go.
Sure.
And we're gonna tone it down a little bit. I gave it a 7.
Okay.
So I didn't want to go too crazy, but I mean they blew up a Zeppelin. Like a lot of flames. There were a lot of flames, honestly.
It blew up a little bit too slow to allow the good guys to get off of the plane or off of the airship.
Zeppelin.
But
Zeppelin.
Airship.
Zeppelin.
Airship. It's an airship.
Anyways.
It blows up really good.
It blows up very slowly.
So some of the things I think that worked really well, they took the original creator, right? Because this is based on comic books. So Dave Stevens made this as kind of a homage to the 1930s, 1950s pulp fiction comics. But they took all of his references because, he drew all these planes and spaces and stuff. And they just wholesale used that just to make the sets. And I think that shows through really well. He also apparently gave them contacts on who to get in touch with to be able to maybe use these vintage planes. Because he had contacted people because he needs, it's 1982. You can't just Google this. He needs images of these planes. So he just found people who had the vintage planes. So I think that sold out and went through really well because it has so much, he had such a rigor and a devotion to the stylings of that type of comic. And then it translates into the film, which then you get, again, really good 1938 styling, that Art Deco feel, just feels so good on screen. Big tip to the opening sequence. Yeah. With the, you have the logo, music scoring, and then they open the hangars, and the hangars is actually like the logo splitting apart and being pushed by the men. I thought that was a great shot.
Good opening, yeah.
Fun joke fact, I guess, for it is Disney actually invented shaky cam for this film. And they wanted to use it in the Zeppelin fight. And then after they shot it, they realized it was terrible because
it was too shaky.
They just looked at shaky cam. They're like, this is a terrible idea. And it was before Jason Bourne, so no one else thought it was a good idea either. So they just stabilized it to make it not terrible.
Yeah.
Andrew?
Well, I mean, okay, you talked about everything that you liked. Why did you give it a 7?
Well, ultimately, I think it's that 30-year gap. You have some of the shots where the blue screening or green screening really kind of shows out. And also we have the sequence in the club where he's kind of flying around and it's just, they're just kind of like, they didn't have the budget to do what they wanted to do there. So they just kind of like, you just fly in circles and then you punch through, the matte painting, which really stands out as well. That is supposed to be, the glass dome ceiling or whatnot. So some of that kind of takes you out of it. I think they really sold out for a lot of stuff, but it just, it may just be modern TVs hurting it too, right? You have such a high resolution that for me coming from, I saw it as a kid, saw it as, a teenager, these kinds of things. And then you start to see it now and you're like, oh yeah, that's kind of rough. Yeah.
I mean, I can kind of agree with that, but I also don't. I gave it an 8.
Okay.
So I'm right in the middle.
Yeah.
I really thought that, for 1991, this is probably the last live action Disney film of that era. Of basically before computer graphics could start kind of like pushing together and pushing out a lot of like the early blue screening and then just general like model usage, scale model usage and that kind of thing. And it really reminded me watching it today for the first time. It really felt like the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea live action film from 1956. Not in a bad way. Like it had that same kind of very pulpy kind of feel where it's some of the concepts in the film are a little ridiculous, but they put so much effort into making it look as good and as stylistic as possible that it really carried over quite a bit. Like the little like restaurant kind of the
dog,
that was a cool.
And then just the little like clamshell and everything and the
nightclub,
there we go. The nightclub was just really
the Seven Seas. What was it called?
South Seas.
South Seas.
Yeah.
It, like that kind of styling. It's so like otherworldly or like so like exactly what you would think it would be in Hollywood.
Well, it's just that either late 20s or late 30s wealth, like the ostentation of nobody else could afford this, but we're going to be the best nightclub ever, and our band is going to play in a giant clamshell that's suspended in a fountain. And we also pay, live actresses because it's Hollywood, and they're just, you trip over and walking down the street to be, mermaid swimmers in giant tanks, right? That the mob boss's office is on the other side of these kinds of things.
And the one thing that I really loved was that instead of getting, Jaws from being the bad guy henchman from James Bond films, we got arms. And he loves to break people and bend them in half.
Bend them.
The wrong
pretzels.
way.
Yeah.
And his prosthetics on his face were really interesting. Because obviously, like, they're probably like, all right, you're going to have a couple lines. And whenever you say these lines, you don't move your mouth.
Right.
It's like as minimal movement as possible.
That or he was trying as hard as he could, and that's all he had.
Yeah, or he just couldn't move his mouth.
Yeah.
He was actually stylized to look like another like earlier like 1950s or like late 1930s maybe actor who had an actual disease that caused that kind of formation.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So the actual actor though, he wasn't as like big physically, but he looked like
give him some lifts.
He had the face. Well, they just shot, it's like horror film, so you have the same shadow scene like they did when he comes into the hospital.
Oh man, yeah, I was about to say that.
It's the same. Well, you can gush about it. I'm just going to mention it, but it's the same kind of technique. But he had the face, and that's who they modeled the face.
Yeah,
on.
well, he had the like the really defined jaw. And
big nose.
But I love that shot whenever he's sneaking into the hospital for the first time. And it's so much like a comic book to where you have like the shadow of the bad guy coming through the window against the wall to where you don't see his face yet. You just know that he's a bad guy. And
but then they bookend that scene with the cop looking out the window and his feet go. And he makes like this weird little dainty, like
it's like, did we need to see that? Probably not.
On the edge of the windowsill, and I was like, okay, what?
Yeah, all they had to show us. All they had to show us was the feet, and the cop looked out the window and not see it.
Yeah,
just
that was it.
Cut the scene.
And then he just
all right, slide off.
Yeah.
They actually just left him up there. They're like, okay, get down if you can.
Well, see, what would have been better? He just jumped off the side of the building, and you're just like, where did he go? We don't know.
Disappears. You don't know. You're like, how high was it? Was it a story? Was that 60 feet? Like, what happened?
Yeah.
So for you, what brought it down to an 8?
It's really just the final sequence was a little. It was one blocked pretty weird, just because like you have they're Griffith Observatory. And you have the bad guys, and then you basically Cliff just allows himself to get surrounded by all the mobsters. And then you have like the double cross of the mobsters, and then the double cross of all the paratroopers coming out, and then the double cross of all the FBI coming out. And then they all start firing, but the German soldiers literally do nothing. They don't even shoot their guns. They just get waxed.
They're there to be shot.
And then you follow Timothy Dalton while trying to like, handle Jennifer Connelly up this rope ladder, which if you've ever been on a rope ladder is impossible to climb any kind of efficient.
Yeah,
that's how I get into my house every night.
Yeah. And then you have like it's kind of a really weirdly paced fight inside of the Zeppelin where it doesn't like, I don't know, like it didn't have the type of like punctuation or snap that you would expect like a final battle to have.
Yeah.
And it was a little underwhelming.
It got a little clunky inside the Zeppelin.
Yeah, it was just kind of because it's such a confined space, and they clearly all shot it in that confined space where like the camera guy is like in between both actors and he's like, all right, I'm going to look over at you. All right, I'm going to look over at you. And
I wonder if part of that was the shaky cam correction stuff of like maybe
they had
the
to
shots.
Cut some stuff they couldn't
use certain angles or something because of
I could
the stabilization effort. Like they only get so much to work with.
Yeah.
Well, and part of it too is they spend a lot of the film establishing that Cliff, our protagonist, is not a very good fighter, and he doesn't have a gun at this point. He doesn't like he can't really
he's a terrible fighter.
Yeah. So we're not gonna like just drop Jackie Chan with a jetpack on. Although that would be awesome. In the middle of this, right? So
TM.
They did, a good job, I think, within that of it being less of like a brawn and more of a brains play, and that's just kind of how it works out. But yeah, I mean, I can see, because this is kind of I don't want to call it like a precursor to what we see with the MCU, and MCU third act, it's time for a big CGI fest, and that's not really what we get here.
Yeah, well, and it's definitely one of those things too, where throughout the film they definitely show you that Cliff is not good at fighting. At least 3 times where he throws hands with someone and immediately gets smacked back down.
Right.
And then he picks up a gun and he doesn't even use it and he immediately loses it. Then and then on the offset you have Timothy Dalton who is shown basically from the first scene that he's in that he is very proficient with weapons. He's very proficient with just any kind of like active kind of fighting or anything like that because he does his own stunts.
Yeah.
And then, that is a plot point in the film. And it's definitely one of those, where like clearly Cliff is completely outmatched whenever in any kind of physical thing. He just happens to have a jetpack. Congratulations.
Yeah.
and a heart of gold.
Yeah, and a heart of gold.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to move on because we're kind of a little bit talking about the actors right now. Anyways,
Yeah.
we're going to move on to the performance.
Yes.
You can go, Steven.
Oh, yeah, I get to go. Okay, well, we're going to start with this. I don't know. I might get bashed for this. And I may have been harder than I should have been because I try not to let childhood nostalgia cloud. I gave this a 7.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
So I'm gonna let y'all, because I know we've got a Timothy Dalton fan club in here.
I love Timothy Dalton.
Well, I said club, not just person. Club. So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna hit something else. And Alan Arkin, so Peavy, and Billy Campbell, so Cliff Secord, right? Our main protagonist and his mechanic friend helper, right?
Yeah.
They have really, really hit and miss chemistry. There are some scenes where it just feels very much like, oh, these are just two actors on stage. And then there are other scenes where you're like, oh, yeah, no, these are old friends and buds who just get along. And it's so up and down that it actually kind of knocks you out sometimes. And even from like the first opening sequences are actually kind of rough. And then they kind of get into a groove and then it kind of falls apart for a little bit and they get back into a groove. And it makes you wonder if you went back and you could see the actual production, what scene was shot when.
It's maybe all the scenes that felt off those were at the beginning of production.
Of production, yeah.
And then by the
towards
time they
end,
got their rhythm.
They finally got in a groove. So it's one of these things where they're so crucial to the story that these kind of speed bumps as we're trying to accelerate into, the second act, et cetera, it kind of hurt it. And that really is probably my main ding, just because they're so crucial to it. There's other people that I'm going to let you all talk about who do a good job. And these two are, I don't want to call them out and just be like, his body of work post this movie isn't tremendous, right?
Yeah.
Campbell, where we were just like, well, name another movie. We couldn't. Or no, I'm sorry. I stand corrected. Ryan had one.
Bram Stoker's Dracula.
There it is. You want to jump in?
Sure, I'll go. I also gave performance a 7.
Okay.
So I was at war with myself on this one a lot because there is a lot to like in Timothy Dalton, obviously. And I'll let Andrew have most of that conversation because it'll probably just be a repeat of everything I would say. Timothy Dalton's incredible.
Yep.
Billy Campbell as Cliff has the charisma of a wet blanket. He is just like functional at best. Like
he looks the part.
He looks the part.
He got the haircut for the part.
But he is a 5 out of 10 anytime he's on screen for me. Like his interactions with Jennifer Connelly, his interactions with Alan Arkin, like all of it feels like he technically said the line and he did it with the right inflection.
He was there.
But it didn't connect, it just didn't work.
Yeah.
And like I completely agree that like the chemistry between, Peavy and Cliff should be like, it should be what the movie is about. Like you should feel like the two of them are going back and forth. So I want to shout out though, all of these side characters, right? So obviously you can talk about Dalton. We've covered Billy Campbell.
Dalton's not a side character.
Jennifer Connelly does, I would say, not the best acting of her career, obviously. It's functional. I would say her and Alan Arkin both don't do anything bad, but they don't do anything spectacular, in my opinion. But she does, like, the role of what she's supposed to be doing.
I'm going to disagree with you there. And if Andrew doesn't snap it up, I'll have to get it.
Okay.
I'm going to let you have it later. It's okay.
I will continue.
Okay. So, to me, the way it ranks is, like, Dalton knocked it out of the park. Connelly and Alan Arkin were, like, fine. And then Billy Campbell was terrible. That's my like breakdown of the main people, right? Then when you get into like Paul Sorvino as the mob boss, I thought he was really good, but he's kind of typecast, but he does that well.
Yeah, there's nothing really to add to the role of a mob boss, but he did a good job.
But he did a really good job for like, again, this pulpy, like we need a mob boss. You got Paul Sorvino, you got the guy. I thought Terry O'Quinn as Howard Hughes did really good.
Oh yeah, he was fantastic.
He really nailed that. John Polito, who played Bigelow, he always plays the skeevy dude. Same thing, like typecast, but you need that skeevy guy. You got him, and I thought he did pretty good as that character of like, you could do the clown act,
So the first time that he was on screen, I was paying attention to something else, and then I heard him talk, and I was like, is that Danny DeVito? Because he plays basically the same kind of character, because we just recently watched Matilda. Yeah. And that is like emphatically that character. It's just like the skeevy, just sleazy. You know, you just feel the grease.
Yeah. Grease and greed.
Yeah.
And the last one I want to throw out, because there's a bunch of others, but there was Max Grodenchik. I hope I'm saying that right. He played the opening mob guy who's driving the car, who hides the jetpack.
Oh, okay.
He's Nog from Deep Space Nine. Yes. And as a Star Trek fan, I had to throw that out there, that dude plays.
Oh, is that
Nog.
why when I was looking up the cast photos, there's just a random Star Trek?
Just random Ferengi. Yeah, that was that dude. So yeah, that's me on performance, a 7. So I was going to rate it higher for Dalton, lower for Billy. I met at the 7 because I thought everyone else did really, because another thing about the acting in this movie is so much of it is like over the top, but intentionally.
Yeah.
So I was at war of like, do I rate this bad because they're not really acting good, but they're acting like a pulp movie would? You know, like I was kind of torn between, you know, my thoughts on that of like, this isn't going to win an Academy Award.
No.
But they did what they set out to. You know, it was like that. So that was kind of like where I got torn. Anyways, Andrew.
Okay, so I am going to be exactly like you guys. I give it 7.
Oh, wow. All right.
So essentially, basically the exact same thing. Billy was just, he was bad. He looks the part. If he never had to speak a line, he'd be the call, because he looks exactly like how I would imagine, you know, this hotshot pilot that unfortunately doesn't have any money in the 1930s would look. I love his outfit, the whole movie with like the double-breasted leather. It's like, oh man, that's so cool.
I know you want to buy one of those jackets.
I do. But the crowning achievement for this film is Timothy Dalton. He's a traditional theatrical actor. And, you know, obviously he's done other movies like James Bond. He was in Hot Fuzz. He was in Penny Dreadful, which is a TV series. And, you know, you have these, you can definitely tell that he is just far and above. Like he's not even phoning it in. He's just like, this is just autopilot for him because he's just really good at what he does. And my favorite thing is that it's such a meta move because he's playing an actor that does his own stunts as an actor that does his own stunts. And
then they call it out.
But honestly, okay, so talking about Jennifer Connelly, I wasn't sold on her until she got kidnapped and brought into where she's having a one-on-one basically conversation where it's super creepy with her and Timothy Dalton. And she is basically acting like she's interested, and then she's clearly not. And then, you know, he's, according to him, it's not lying, it's acting. Yeah. And that scene really did it for me, especially whenever she's like, well, I finally did a scene with
Neville Sinclair.
Neville Sinclair.
Yeah.
And I was like, ooh, yeah. That's the type of Jennifer Connelly I want to see here.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, she only got that one role or one really good scene for it.
Yeah.
Just because the rest of the film, she's either mad at Cliff or she's just kind of being a wallflower.
Sure.
Where she's just kind of like there's a couple scenes where she's definitely helping out, you know, save Cliff from whatever, you know, thing's going to happen. She knocks the mobster out in the head twice with the flower pot, which doesn't work, but continue. And, you know,
flower pots are very deadly in this universe.
They really are. I mean, like, it put Dalton out like immediately. Like, just not even like.
I was like, check his pulse.
they killed him on set for that.
He went
scene.
down too fast.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you know, overall, it's just the chemistry between PV and Cliff was just really off and on. Like, there was a couple scenes where I'm like, oh yeah, that was nice, and then. Especially whenever they're in the kind of like attic section of the diner that they normally go in.
The dog.
And
the head of the dog.
And basically Cliff is running to go grab and save his girl. And then PV just kind of runs up and he just like says this one line of like, we were supposed to give it to the feds. And I was like, that is the stalest line I have ever heard. It was like, he would like, they just told him, it was like, all right, you need to say this. And he was like, okay.
And,
well,
and like, Alan Arkin's a really good actor.
He's a great actor.
And so there were definitely some deliveries of like that line. And there's a couple others where it's like, I can't tell if he's just trying to be so deadpan to play off of what would hopefully be someone really charismatic or what happened. But yeah, his line would come across and you'd be like, y'all didn't have a better take of that? Or that was the one you went with?
And I'll definitely say I love Terry O'Quinn as Howard Hughes. He, we just recently finished watching Lost.
Oh, wow.
And it's so interesting because Terry O'Quinn's a fantastic actor.
Yeah.
And it's really kind of sad because this may be entirely his choice, but, he was in The Rocketeer and he's basically been in just a bunch of random TV shows, not as main billing characters. Yeah. Then he was one of the main characters in Lost for, all 6 seasons. And he won, I think, like 4 Emmys and was nominated for like 5 more throughout the course of the show. And he still just kind of doesn't really do anything else.
Yeah.
It is a little strange.
It is really weird because like he's a fantastic actor, and
it always makes you wonder with actors like that of like, is it his choice? Is he like,
or did he just,
I'm good?
Yeah, just or maybe he's not a likable person.
Is
he
a
life.
Nightmare on set? Yeah, like, or is his agent terrible? Like what's happening?
Yeah,
his agent is like his brother. He's just doing him a solid.
Yeah, because I mean he definitely has the acting chops, and him as Howard Hughes was really nice, just because he like. You could definitely tell he has like kind of like the wonder of aviation still, like that part of his career, because this is before the Spruce Goose even came out and was like he tried to actually fly it. So it was still in development, which was really fun. And I thought it was a solid 7 for everyone if you average it out. I
agree with the Jennifer Connelly thing of like I think the problem there though is just like.
She just wasn't given enough.
I don't know. Yeah, she wasn't given enough, but also like, again, that's kind of accurate to like the period piece type movie. And I've never read the comics.
Or the Pulp Fiction damsel in distress kind of thing.
I don't know how far out of the pulp mode they were even trying to break. Like giving her that one scene was probably like, oh, wow.
Oh,
she did something.
It's 1991. Did a woman do something?
But I will say that Timothy Dalton, like, man, he chews through the script like a roast beef sandwich. This guy, like he shows up on set. It reminded me, it's not quite as intense as this, but it was almost like Raul Julia in Street Fighter, where it's like he was given this basic line, but he delivers it with just like this incredible amount of passion. And then you got Alan Arkin over here who's like, don't go, Cliff. And it's just like, what?
Like, yeah. Because I love whenever they're doing like the movie set, and the girl that's playing, I guess, like the princess or whatever, and she delivers that line, and the look of exasperation on his face, where it's kind of a fourth wall break too, because you're into the scene, and then you're just like, oh, they're filming a movie, got it, okay.
Yeah.
I will say, I think, especially for this one, Jennifer Connelly maybe got hit with a bit of the Liv Tyler thing, where in most movies, Liv Tyler is kind of cast as the pretty scenery, and she doesn't really
get to do much.
She gets to be kind of soft and nice, and it's nice to see, not to use that word twice, but it's nice to see that little bit of steel underneath her in the acting when she gets to fire back at Sinclair, and also later, she gets to do the move to break free. Shoots a flare gun in an enclosed space. We'll leave that one to its own little world, but
she did something.
She did do some things, but
And in defense of her to being like mad at Cliff all the time, he's ostensibly a bum who like barely has a job, and she's like this actress who has a literal scene, even if it's just an extra,
like walks in
a major picture,
knocks it over.
No, but when she tells him, when he picks her up for the date, she's like, I've got new lines. He goes, all right, tell me what they are. And she's like, I'm in a movie with Neville Sinclair. Oh, okay. What do you say? And I'm like, she's an actress. You're going to be the clown guy in like a week because you can't stop wrecking things. Yeah, like,
it's one of those things when you look at the two of them, you're like, you have outkicked your coverage massively, man. You need to pay a little more attention to what's going on here.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the score of the score.
But
I give it a 7.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah. I mean, it was mostly memorable just because I am so familiar with the Titanic soundtrack that I feel that I'm just watching Titanic. And I don't know if that's because of temp music or if it's just because James Horner was really going through a phase.
just plagiarized himself.
But I do like the main theme that they have,
So
that they play throughout.
What year was Titanic? 97?
97.
Yeah, 97.
So you're looking at like a 6-year gap there.
Yeah.
So,
That's a long phase.
I was going to say, that's a long phase. That's what's happening.
So if it's that much of a long phase, I mean, you would think that it would possibly be, temp music.
Maybe that's what
that James Cameron used from The Rocketeer, because he's like, well, I'm going to have James Horner. Let's put this in here. And then, I actually really like this. And now we just have to make the whole film.
Yeah, because it was kind of similar feel, right? You have kind of the romance, not like a traditional romance, but the romance of the sea. And exploration, and not quite the same period, but not far off from it either. So
and it definitely had a very good like emotional air to it, especially on that opening scene whenever he's flying the GB. Oh man.
Yeah, it's a good scene.
It's music that makes you feel like they have a love for aviation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what that music reminds me of like this, like things are going to fly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What'd you give it?
I gave it a 7 also.
Okay.
My thing was, I liked the theme. I feel like there was a lot of creative uses of it where they remixed it and, they make it go into like a minor key, or they would like, they used it throughout. But I think at some point that became to a detriment, because like after a while, it's the same theme. They're just doing slight variations over and over and over.
Maybe they only paid him for like 3 tracks.
It could have been, because my other complaint is there's a couple of scenes that just don't have music in them that I feel like need music. Like in the opening crash, towards the halfway through the crash, the music stops and never comes back. And at the end, when he gets out of the plane and he kind of has this like, like reaction, it almost feels like there should be a boom, boom, like, like at the end of like a music to like have a comedy hit there. That's like just not there. And I'm like, that feels weird that they didn't have something there. The other thing was there's a couple of scenes, the one with Jennifer Connelly and Timothy Dalton when he's kidnapped her, where there's definitely some 90s keyboard sounds going on that like dates it just a little bit to like, this is a 90s movie.
And
whereas
not
everything
good
else,
dating.
not like this is a period piece from the 30s. Everything else has a good like feel that could, it's not like the music they had in the 30s, but it feels like it's accurate to that era. And then there's like this just keyboard from the 90s, twinkling in the background. I was like, okay, well that seems kind of a little off. But that only happened a couple times. So because of that, and because I wouldn't listen to this soundtrack over and over, I knocked it down to a 7. Yeah. I thought it was solid. Like the opening, especially when the hangar opens and reveals the title and the song is first playing, that's really good. Like that my first impression was like, ooh, the score is really good.
Yeah.
It just didn't
hold
throughout.
Throughout. Yeah.
What about you, Steve?
Well, I've tried to be nice because I know that I have a lot of nostalgia built in. So I'm trying to be very cautious, I guess, about going through. And, the opening sequence hit and it's like, wow, there's music in this movie. As a kid, I didn't care about the music. I wanted to watch things
don't even
fly.
think about it. Yeah.
Put the jetpack on, dude. Let's go. I give it an 8.
Okay.
Because, the main theme is great. I think they do a really good job. And to your point, Ryan, while they do come back to it a lot, they do a good job of building and mixing off of that theme. Some of the other pieces I really liked, the singing when they're in the South Seas club.
It's great.
It's like if you if you just played that sequence for me, I'd be like, well, this is the 20s or the 30s.
Yeah.
Just nailed instantly.
And it's Jan from The Office.
I was about to say that because I was like, the first time I saw her, I was like, she looks really familiar. And then I was like, oh my gosh, it's Jan.
Yeah.
That's great. I did not catch that at all. I didn't really watch a ton of The Office, but I just didn't catch that at all. And it's always fun to go back through 90s movies and be like, oh, this person blew up like 3 years after this. They just became a name.
Yeah.
Not Billy Campbell, but other people. For other people.
There's a reason for that. He did other stuff after that. I just don't think he was very good at Rocketeer.
He's had TV shows and lots of other stuff. I don't mean to just absolutely rag on him, but I just...
Billy, if you're listening, like...
Somehow.
You're a great guy, but not in The Rocketeer.
We appreciate you. You've come a long way.
You looked good.
Your
hair was fantastic.
Really good hair. Like better than Billy Zane in the early 90s hair.
Oh, so Billy Zane had very, very nice hair in the early 90s.
If you're listening, Billy, Zane or Campbell.
Other Billy.
Hit me up.
This became the score of the hair, not the score of the score.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's good. It's good. But yeah, no, I think for the most part they hit the period well, and they had that, like you all said, the feel of flight in the music.
It did.
Which just really sells it for me. So good score. Plot.
I'll go. I gave plot a 7. Definitely, I was at war with myself on like, is this a good plot or is this a bad plot? Wait, it's trying to be like a pulp
comic
movie.
book. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's accurate to that, but like it's extremely convoluted. There's like 4 different foils, if you will, for the Rocketeer. There's the FBI trying to catch him.
Yep.
The mob is trying to catch him. Timothy Dalton's trying to catch him, and the Nazis are trying to catch him. You know, like there's a lot going on. But
And he's having a whole subplot with this girl.
yeah, there's a whole girl subplot. But I'll say, as complicated as it is on paper on that level, like it was very easy to follow.
Oh, yeah.
It was very well executed. Much easier to follow than like some modern movies that have like much simpler plots.
Mhm.
But like I think the thing that made me bring it down a little bit was just like, for being as jam-packed as it is and as convoluted as it could be, it felt very slow at times. And I feel like with the plot, they could have trimmed certain scenes or sped them up or had them happen quicker so that like we get to more rocket action, I guess is my, like, again, budgetary constraints not considered, like looking at just the A to B plot of what's happening. I feel like there's a few scenes that drag on a little too long. There's a few places where like they could have cut out of this, and like maybe scenes they could have cut entirely, you know, at the end of the day, just to keep it like moving forward.
So I gave it a 7 as well. I mean, like honestly, yeah, I mean, it was the thing that I love about Disney films a lot of times is that they really, at least at this point in time for whenever they're making films, they really took the time to make sure that if there was going to be anything that later like comes up in the film, they had at least 1 or 2 lines of dialogue that explained it. So whenever Cliff gets the jetpack from Peavy the first time, so he can go wear it, you know, Peavy says, "Hey, I changed the controls to where you can change how high or how much thrust," and that's it. There's only 1 single line of dialogue, and the second that he starts using it inside of the nightclub, then you're like, cool, that's already explained, because only thing we've seen at this point, it is going light speed.
It's just ballistic.
Well, you see him use it when he rescues the guy dressed up as the clown.
Yeah.
He does the thing with the stop or whatever.
And and those kind of little inclusions here and there really fits or picks a lot of nits from me that I can't, like, I'm like, oh yeah, I got you right there. The only thing that really knocked it for me was just the final act where just like paratroopers exist. And the Zeppelin isn't over them at that point. So it's like, so did the paratroopers like get off early and then like find their way around in Los Angeles to like be, I don't know, it's really weird.
They hailed a cab and said, "Yo, Griffith Observatory, got to be there by 7."
Yeah, you know, because they can speak English and everything.
I mean, totally. If you're going to drop them off in the country,
maybe the Zeppelin dropped him off earlier that day and then just circled really slowly.
It's possible.
Yeah, they're good
to
at
make
that.
a really good entrance, you know, where
Looming over the.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, like probably the biggest thing for me was the just the blatant sexism for Jennifer Connelly. Like, it's one thing to have a very pretty actress have, you know, just be a wallflower and just kind of be like the MacGuffin for the film for the protagonist. But then there's another thing where they literally reference her breasts and then point the camera directly at them.
Right.
In reference to that. And it's like, come on, this is Disney, guys. Like, you don't need this.
Yeah, having her as the object to be obtained. Okay, we'll let that one slide. Objectifying her in that. Well, hold on. Whoa, slow down. Slow that one back.
For me, it's specifically that scene though, because like everything else
was fine.
She's
it's more just a glamour thing.
It's more of a glamour thing, which again, I keep coming back to, like, that's kind of how it was in the pulp, you know,
absolutely.
stories. But that specifically one scene where W.C. Fields ogles her and then we get a first person view as the audience of what he's seeing is kind of like, what's happening?
Yeah.
They released this as a PG movie in theaters in 1991.
Disney was like, yeah.
Go
ahead.
That's totally fine. It's totally of the age. And it's like, but it is, but also it's of the age now. And that's also not cool because anyways, I digress. Steven?
So I give plot a 6.
Okay.
And it's just, there's a lot of kind of circumstantial stuff.
It is a very circumstantial film.
Well, and one of those things where like finding people in a city in the 30s, you can't just, you don't have a cell phone, right? You can't just Google them and locate it. So this whole like, oh, we found these guys and oh, well, this number's on the wall. And then, well, oh, there's the photo over here. And just kind of, it was almost a little too easy. And again, it's that issue of, well, is this a pulp comic or is this just kind of lazy writing? And it's like, well, at some point, all these parties have to collide somewhere.
Yeah.
And then we're going to have Nazis spring up out of the bush and get shot and mowed down by the feds and the mob because that's just what you do, right? You have your Tommy gun and you kill the Nazis with it.
If you have a Tommy gun, you have to shoot it.
You have, at the Nazis.
And you have to hip fire it too.
Oh, yeah. No, there is no shouldering. None of that. No, that's not how. You just pull the trigger, drop the drum, put a new drum in, and
I mean,
let her
we
rip.
have to turn a house into a gazebo. So
There's a lot of shots fired in this movie.
there is, and no one gets hit.
Can we talk about how the
no.
FBI go to their house and they don't even know if these guys are the bad guys, and the FBI is like, light them up, and they just blow their house to Swiss cheese?
Hold on now. Now, we can take offense to the fact that the actor is very poor,
Sure.
but they're getting shot at before they open fire. All right, we got Jaws arms dude, ripping off, dual pistols out at them, like 1911s or something, I guess.
Just love the escalation of like,
oh, yeah, no.
2 bullets, throw 1,000 at them.
I mean, it is the Fed. Come on now.
Yeah. And again, that is what you think of with like the, Untouchables era. Like,
yeah, I mean, it definitely fits that kind of time period of, well, we're dealing with mobsters. They probably have some machine guns in there. We also brought our machine gun.
Yeah, well, I mean, we kick it right off with the car chase with just, pistols versus the Tommy gun in the back, the bucket seat and the rear of the car.
Yeah.
And it just kind of escalates from there.
I love that model of car, too. It's so cool.
It's such an icon. Again, if you want to set a period piece, you put that on the screen and
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, 6 for the paratroopers were a little much. Everybody they just stand there to be gunned down, which is just odd. The Zeppelin, whether or not it's been circling LA after dropping off its school bus load, that's a sneaky airship coming up over that observatory because
really
nobody
is.
knows it's there. Then
they turned the engine off and just coasted.
Yeah, they like cruised in. Like the breeze is perfect, guys. You're gonna make a perfect entrance.
I think too the twist that Timothy Dalton was a Nazi came almost a little too late in the movie. Like it feels
should have been a little bit earlier
because by that point when it happens, it almost feels like and another bad guy, or another set of the Nazis. I feel like should have been in play earlier.
Yeah,
than that.
You get the impression that he's working for someone else because he's directing the mob.
Yeah,
but you don't get that. Like we don't have where he chews out the mob boss. And then turns around. And so they actually cut a scene of him using an actual Enigma machine to send a message for time constraints. So they filmed the scene of him doing this. And that may have actually landed earlier in the film. And then you would have known, as soon as you see an Enigma machine, I know for me, it's just like, oh.
Well, so, I mean, this was an hour 48 film, which is actually pretty long for the time. Most of the time,
15 minutes long.
Yeah, most of the time is a $1.30 is kind of where a lot of those films landed. So it's already a relatively long film, and they definitely took a very long time to set up basically everything in the film. Like you were almost 45 minutes in before the jetpack was even a thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just because you have the chase scene, then you have the plane scene, then you have his scene with Jennifer Connelly. Then you have the scene with Howard Hughes. Then you have the scene with, I mean,
it goes and goes.
It just keeps going.
9-year-old Ryan was angry by that point of where is the jetpack?
Yeah, it's like, you're here. I know you're here.
Oh, yeah, it does feel a little slow though at times. It's got maybe a pacing issue somewhere in there, despite, again, they cut stuff that may have been relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like we're ready to move into entertainment.
Sure.
So who wants to take it first?
Not me. I've already gone first too many times.
I'll go first. I give Entertainment an 8.
Yeah.
I think this is a solid movie. It's a lot of fun to watch. I mean, for me, I caught myself laughing out loud a lot, more so at the ridiculousness of something that was happening instead of an intentional comedic moment.
Yeah.
And my wife was upstairs and she just kept hearing me just cackle at random things. And she would come downstairs. She'd be like, I don't remember Rocketeer being that funny. I'm like, it's just
ridiculous.
It's just ridiculous. But I think for a popcorn movie to just turn your brain off and not worry about the physics of would he die if he landed in a swamp?
Would he just not have legs because of all the flames from the jetpack?
Yeah, just burning the back of his thighs off.
If you can just relax and have fun, I think this is a great movie. I think it actually works really well as a kids movie, pacing issues aside. In terms of it's pretty fun, pretty lighthearted. And again, I think Timothy Dalton alone is a 8 in entertainment for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just watching him.
He carries basically every scene that he's in.
Every scene, yeah.
Yeah. Steven?
I gave it a 9.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, this is again, childhood, right? Saw this in theaters, played the video game. It was terrible. I'm almost curious, go find a ROM of it and see how hard it really is. But yeah, I mean, Timothy Dalton sells out, great villain. I need him as a villain more often. Yeah. I actually had totally forgotten about some of the other things he's been in.
Like Hot Fuzz?
I wasn't going to say it, but you did, so we'll go on. But yeah, I just, the period is great. The feel is great. The love of flying really comes through, the kind of almost the mystery and magic of aviation.
Yeah, because especially at the time period, this was still the very early stages of flight.
Oh, and it's moving forward by leaps and bounds. The concept of strapping an engine to the back of someone and they become a hovering paratrooper in a sense. That was something that was being looked into. They leaps and bounds from a biplane to jet engines at the end of World War II, right?
Yeah.
So that is definitely there. And also there's some really good humor. We kind of knocked it. There's a little miss in chemistry, but there are some great one-liners in here. Howard Hughes confronting the feds and saying, "Congratulations, gentlemen. This vacuum cleaner will never threaten national security again." It's just stuff like that is just perfect. And it had the feel of the type of the timing and kind of the tension relief that we see in modern MCU films. And it kind of feels almost like the prototype of that.
Yeah.
Andrew?
Yeah. So I gave it an 8. This definitely hits the level where I will rewatch it again. Normally 8 is kind of my threshold. And honestly, I had so much fun watching this film. It was, a good mix of Indiana Jones and, I guess a superhero film. I don't really count him as a superhero film. He's just a guy with a jetpack.
It was kind of like The Mummy.
A little bit, yeah. Because you have, this kind of ragtag group of characters that all just kind of are there. Unfortunately, obviously some of the chemistry just wasn't there like it was in The Mummy, which is just fantastic casting.
Yeah.
But
I feel like if this movie had been made in the late 90s, early 2000s, Brendan Fraser would have been
he would have been
absolutely.
Oh, he would have been perfect for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have even just the rocket stuff aside, I just love kind of going back to that era, especially of Hollywood. I don't like the sexism in that time of Hollywood, but I like just the aesthetic.
Yeah. The glitz and the glam.
Yeah, it's exactly what you think. And, I love that they threw in a couple little nods to the Spruce Goose for he.
It will fly.
It will fly. Kind of. But
not very far.
But then you also have Timothy Dalton basically falling to his death and destroying the land sign. So it just turns into Hollywood, which, it's one of those things where that's obviously not how it happened, but it's still just hilarious because you're just like, well, there you go.
Yeah. I'm curious as to how many times that has occurred in movies, because that's happened more than, a handful of times of this is how we justify the fact that the land has been destroyed.
Yeah.
Or was removed. And I'm trying to think of other instances.
There is a cartoon movie. Was it Who Framed Roger Rabbit, maybe? I don't know.
Probably. That would be a very...
where basically someone throws something and it lands and it hits the sign and the sign falls over.
Yeah, I know there's a couple other instances. I can't think of one right offhand, but there are definitely other movies where that occurs.
Yeah. But I'm honestly watching this for my first time, and I've never heard anything bad about the film. I was genuinely enjoying watching it. It was a lot of fun, and I love the styling of his outfit. It's just, I can't get over how cool it is. I really want one of those double-breasted leather jackets. It won't look good on me, but I want one.
You're going to have that. You have the pants, the mid-calf boots.
Yeah.
You're going to walk out to get in your 300 and put the helmet on.
Oh, God.
With the fin. It doesn't work with the headrest. You're just banging stuff around.
It doesn't work with that car either, but it's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, honestly, I'd totally watch it again. Like it was, because I know my wife hasn't seen it, and I'm sure that we'll probably throw it on at some point, just, when we're, making some scale models or doing something else, and just throw it on the background. And it's totally worth that kind of watch, I think.
Yeah.
Definitely. Especially it's very available, Disney Plus streaming. It's just right there. So if you're already paying for it, then you might as well get your money's worth.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the biggest, disappointment, or the one thing that's like, man, what could have been, is if they had cast someone else as Cliff, someone more snappy and charismatic. They probably would have had sequels. It probably would have made a lot more money.
Brendan Fraser would have been perfect for that role.
Brendan Fraser,
if it had been a little older movie.
I don't think he was old enough in 91 necessarily, but like
he might have been, actually. I don't know.
What was that movie where he was like a young high school kid with
I don't even know.
Chris O'Donnell and all those guys.
The youngest I've seen him is in The Mummy. I don't think I've seen any other films with him.
I can't remember the name of that. I'll have to look it up now. But yeah, it was like the early 90s. But I feel like if you have someone else in that role, and I'm trying to think of who would have been I mean, Johnny Depp would have worked. Keanu Reeves probably not, because he'd be like, whoa, a rocket.
So Brendan Fraser, born in 1968. So he would have been 21. Ooh. Been really
that would have been perfect.
That would have been
close. Actually, no, I just messed up that math, didn't I?
Okay.
You did.
24.
24.
Yeah. Even,
that
23,
would have been
24.
Good then. That actually would have been a pretty good. I don't know if he was really,
active
or found at that point.
Well, because wasn't it Kurt Russell?
Oh, they I think Ryan's already hit some names. They tried out, like Campbell was like the 50th choice. At one point in time, Katzenberg actually had one of their staff writers auditioning for the role because they were just find somebody.
Who's that guy with the haircut? Put him in there.
Yeah. But it was like Emilio Estevez, Kurt Russell, Harrison Ford.
Oh man, that would have been weird.
Dennis Quaid.
Yeah.
There are a ton of names who were either auditioned or offered or they wanted but they weren't available. And yeah, obviously, Billy Campbell did his research. To his credit, he did his research. He read the comic and he was like, I need that haircut before the audition. And that was a big factor in what got him in.
I mean, he has the look.
He looks the part. I think if this was made now, it would probably be like Chris Pratt.
Tom Holland.
Tom Holland
is so hot right now.
It probably would be Tom Holland, actually, yeah.
That actually kind of makes me angry.
Oh, I don't want to think about that. I'm not a big Tom Holland fan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
he doesn't like people who hold frogs in their mouth for extended periods of time.
Okay, I feel like there's some context I'm missing.
Oh,
there.
wow. You don't know that?
I don't know.
Man.
What does he do with frogs?
Just go look at a photo of Tom Holland and just with his mouth closed and just imagine that there's frogs in his mouth.
Yeah, so he when he tries to do like this serious acting thing, he like closes his lips and he puffs his cheeks just a little bit and it looks like he has a frog in his mouth that's trying to get out and he doesn't want it to get out.
What kind of frog we talking? Like a bullfrog, tree frog?
I don't know.
Probably a tree frog.
Okay.
He's not
small frog.
He's not a big dude.
Yeah. Well, okay. So on that note,
that is definitely all the time we have for this episode. So until next time, I'm Steven.
I'm Andrew.
I'm Ryan.
And as always, every spoiler was intended.